My name is Augie, and I'm one of the hosts. And my co-host Diana is over in Germany, and she's not able to join us tonight, so she will be with us again next week. And we are also on YouTube and the Universal Consciousness Show. And please subscribe. That's going to help us a lot. And also, you're going to get a little notice once you subscribe and you click on that little mark next to the subscriber button there. That will get you a note when the next show is coming out. So you're not going to miss anything. And we're also on Facebook under me and the Universal Consciousness Show. We're on Twitter under me and plus everywhere else that you may find us. And help us spread this around because there's an awful lot of good information in here. And like us on Facebook while you're at it. And also remember, this station is member and listener supported. So go to the donate button and help it out. So make sure that we're able to stay on the air. This is going to be good. I have a delight for you today. We are talking with Stephen Myers, and we're going to talk about why and how the Cheops pyramid and possibly other pyramids on the Giza plateau in Egypt was built. And if you look back into history, there is some monumental artifacts of old that show some higher technologies that we are not available to use today because we don't know how. And there were evidently some higher thinking back then because they moved these big stones from miles and miles away, and they moved them up all the way to the apex of the pyramids. And another thing that you may want to think about is in Baalbek, Lebanon, there are some big stones laying around that was moved. And the biggest one that I know of at Baalbek was 1,100 tons. And somebody moved that stone. Ask yourself, how did they do that? Well, there may or may not be any explanation to that, but there is definitely some higher technologies in the past, and we're going to talk about those things. So those pyramids that we find around the world, that is definitely some form of evidence of higher technology and higher thinking. So let's talk about that. I want to welcome to the show Stephen Myers. Hello, hello. Are you there?
Yes, Augie, thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, this is going to be so fun. It should be illegal, you know. You have studied this for, I saw on one of your videos on YouTube that you studied this for 20 some years.
Yes, studied how the Great Pyramid was assembled and why it was assembled.
Yeah, and there is a lot of theories on that, and some of those people, they made up those theories by themselves. But I think you've been to the site and you looked at the distances and you looked at things. So I'm going to lean on you a little bit here for some more solid knowledge about this than many of the other theories. So let's talk about this a little bit.
Well, a lot of people have different ideas about how the Great Pyramid was assembled. You know, it is a building, it's a construction project. And some people say there was a big ramp with people with strong backs, with strong ropes, and dragging stones up a ramp and everything. Of course, Egyptology hasn't really demonstrated that. And also, there's the idea that precision stone cutting was accomplished using hand tools, and Egyptology hasn't really demonstrated that either. So I read all those books about that Egyptologists have produced, but they all lacked any type of demonstration. So it's pretty much just storytelling what Egyptologists come up with. So I read alternative books and everything else, and ultimately read a book called Pharaoh's Pump by Edward Kunkel, and it talked about how the Great Pyramid was assembled. and why it was built. So that's was the genesis of my real builders prove that they could build the Great Pyramid, in that they did build it.
Yeah, and I understand also that it extends under the surface of the ground quite a little ways too, but down there is a flat surface that it was built on. But under the ground or inside the basement, so to speak, on the pyramid, there are chambers down there.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I wonder what those were for.
Well, the Great Pyramid is built on solid bedrock, solid limestone, not on sand or anything.
Oh.
And they created a subterranean chamber deep below the Great Pyramid, and that chamber is reached through the descending passage that goes from the Great Pyramid structure all the way down to this large subterranean chamber, which is about 100 feet below the base of the Great Pyramid. Mm-hmm. We think the purpose of that cuttings in the solid bedrock was that it was part of a water pump, that the original builders supplied water to the base of the Great Pyramid, and water entered the subterranean chamber through the descending passage. Other researchers agree with that. And then water moved down into the descending passage, and the descending passage was built to be a monumental and huge water pump, and that water pump supplied water to the water locks that were used to build the Great Pyramid.
Yeah, and in one of your books, you talk specifically about it being an attractor of water, or a pump to get water out of the ground. And I've studied that a little bit too, and I'm finding there's absolutely some evidence to the fact that that is true, because there is in Illinois, northern Illinois, outside of Chicago, there was a man, his name was Onan. He was a contractor, and he built a pyramid, much smaller, but a pyramid, and he took and he put a thin layer of gold on the outside of it. And he had problems building it, because once it was put up, the water kept coming up out of the ground and flooding the area where he was building on. So this structure that he put on the ground right there pulled water out of the ground, and he had to drain it and drain it and drain it, and he figured out, well, I'll just build a moat around the place, and now he's got water around it all. And the people ask him, where does the water come from? And he says, well, the building pulls it out of the ground. So same thing probably happened on the Giza Plateau.
I would think so, yes. The original builders were geniuses and were able to supply water to the Great Pyramid during construction and afterwards. So I've read about that pyramid up there north of Chicago, and but I haven't been there yet. It's on my bucket list to visit that. But yes, he has some gold on the pyramid, some gold statues too as well. So it's quite fascinating. But yes, water and the Great Pyramid have a profound link, both in how the Great Pyramid was built, but also in how it was used.
Yeah, and now the one in Illinois, that is still pulling water out of the ground.
Yes, that is true, and it does have a moat around it. That's for sure. We also think the Great Pyramid had a moat around it. Up into the 17th century, the Great Pyramid did have a wall around it, called a perimeter wall or something like that. Some of the early drawings by Napoleon's savants show that wall that existed just a few centuries ago, and we think that impounded water around the Great Pyramid.
Yeah, and that of course raises another question. If it is a well, which I think it is actually an attractor of water, or a kind of like a water pump, is the term you call. Why isn't there any water there now?
We think that actually there is water below the Great Pyramid. There's a water table, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and the water table, some people say, is higher now than it was, let's say, several hundred years ago, because a lot of it is the table has risen because of all the water from the city, from Cairo itself. So that is an effect, a modern um, effect on the water table. Some of the passages on the Giza Plateau, if you go down in there, you are blocked by water that's down there. So the water table is probably higher now than it was in distant antiquity.
Yeah.
But we think that the Great Pyramid did operate as a water pump through the passages and chambers, but that those the water pump that the Great Pyramid is currently broken. So there's no
Yeah.
water being pumped associated with the Great Pyramid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, the outside structure of the pyramid has been scavenged, I guess I should call it, because a lot of the buildings in Cairo, they have the limestones, I think it is, that was on the outside of the pyramid, of both all three pyramids. They have them on their roofs and they have them in their buildings, and because over the last several hundred years, when Cairo became a bigger city, they were stealing the stones off the pyramids to build their houses with. And I think that's probably, maybe because of the surface was distorted, may have destroyed some of the effect of it.
Yes, in around the year 1000 AD, there was a large earthquake which damaged much of Cairo. And at that time, they used the pyramids, which are right there at Cairo, the pyramids at the Giza Plateau. They used those for quarries, if you will, and took the casing stones, which were high quality limestone,
Yeah.
from the pyramids. There's just a few that remain. It's interesting that those stones that remain at the Great Pyramid are cemented together, watertight. And we think that the casing stones were part of the construction process, in that the first stones that were set in place were the bottom level of the casing stones, and that created a square wall, if you will. And then stones on barges from the Nile River came up the water locks and into that square wall, which is filled with water. So the water locks made the movement of stones very easy, and they moved the stones, the interior stones, for the first level from the barges and set them right down into the pond, if you will. And then when that pond was filled with stones, it completed the first level of the Great Pyramid. And we have a video series on our website at thepump.org that depicts the fascinating construction process used to build the Great Pyramid.
Mm. Yeah, and then I would say, we don't really know how old it is, but back then when it was built, it was a much more luscious terrain and forests and things around there, because we see that from the water erosion on the Sphinx. And I think the pyramids were probably maybe built at the same time or before. So they were able, with accessible water, it could work as a pump. But if there is no accessible access of water, then maybe it wouldn't work as well as it is right now.
Well, you touched on several things. The age of the Sphinx was, until recently, considered to be the same as the age of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau within a generation or two. But because of the water erosion, on the Sphinx, the Sphinx is considered to be much older, possibly pre-Ice Age even,
Yeah.
than Egyptologists think. So there's a lot of controversy about the age of the Sphinx. I think it is much older. Also, because of their proximity, I would think that the pyramids are probably as old as the Sphinx, if you will, if you can say that. So yes, there's a lot of controversy about the age of the both the Sphinx and the pyramids in general. Also controversy about the sequence of construction. But we think the original builders provided water to the Great Pyramid. There's a lot of water evidence associated with the Great Pyramid. There's a harbor right up by the Great Pyramid. You can word search that on the internet. Also, there's a huge sunboats that are right there at the Great Pyramid. We think those were used in the construction. Sir Flanders Petrie, an early researcher and archaeologist, he was actually a father of modern Egyptology. Sir Flanders Petrie found what he called Nile earth inside the passages and chambers, which is sediment. So even Herodotus described the Great Pyramid as being like an island surrounded by water. So there's a lot of water evidence associated with the Great Pyramid.
Well, that fits right in with Onan's building in Illinois.
It does. You are correct.
Yeah. And now if you, let's maybe touch on the pyramid energy a little bit. Decades and decades ago, I used to do some experiments. I had a little pyramid that I rigged up. Well, you know, I had the same dimensions to it, the angles and so on, and I was able to put razor blades inside of it that had been used, and they were dull. I left them there for quite a while, actually, I think several weeks, and I took them out. The doggone thing has sharpened up.
Yes, I've read about that.
Yeah, and
Pyramid power. There's a number of people that are advocates of that, and there may be some truth to that. It's quite interesting. A lot of the evidence is anecdotal, if you will. You know, like preserving fruit and other things like that. But I'm not sure. The Great Pyramid is a big construction project with a big cost. So the purpose must have been big enough to justify that. So sharpening blades or preserving fruit seems like a small return on investment for such a big project. So especially if you can sharpen blades with a smaller structure, then probably the Great Pyramid wasn't used for that purpose. The Great Pyramid also reminds me kind of like of 4 hydroelectric dams. If you ever seen a big dam with the flat face, it's kind of like 4 dams backed up together, if you can imagine that. And on our video series, we have a video that describes that. And we think the reason why the Great Pyramid is a pyramid shape is to impound water that was inside during construction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now the pyramid energy, there is a reason, this is my take on it, and there's a reason why the king's chamber is where it is. Because it appears as the strongest effect of the pyramid energy is right at that location.
That's a possibility.
Yeah, and there's one more thing that I know. I remember from reading some old, you know, when they first came into the king's chamber, when they broke into that and got up there, they found that the sarcophagus up there was not empty. There was a hardened white substance laying in it. You probably read about that. And what
Yeah.
they found, they don't know what it was, or didn't know what it was. They took a bunch of it out and they cleaned it out, and it went different places. I think they have some of it at the museums in Egypt, but a lot of it went to England because they were British, those guys. But it wasn't gold. Was it then the white powdered gold that it said that the Anunnaki used to live forever with? There are records of the Anunnaki in the Middle East living and being on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years, the same person. Was it the same? This is opening up a totally new arena, and it's outside of probably your research, but you may have heard of it.
I've touched on some of that. Yes, there is inside the Great Pyramid a number of materials that have been found. Happened. You call that piece of equipment is Sweet 16, and but exactly how he cut the stones and moved them again is quite a mystery.
Yeah, I know. And the thing is also that nobody knows how he did it, but if he did it, it is possible. And if he sang to the stones, like the kids said, that reminds me of another short movie footage that was floating around Europe decades ago. And that was a Swedish explorer that went to India, and he was up in the mountains, and there were some monks up there that was going to move a stone from the ground up into a cavern in the mountain up quite a ways above there. And they placed themselves with music instrument in a half a circle around the stone. And they started playing those instruments. There wasn't a lot of tunes to it. There was one tone to it for each one of these instruments. And that stone lifted off the ground and headed straight up into that cavern in the mountain. Well, it's kind of like a not a mountain, so to speak, but it was smaller than that. But it lifted off the ground and headed where it was going. This was on movie footage that the Swede came back with, and of course it's disappeared now because I'm sure Smithsonian or somebody got a hold of it.
Yeah,
But
I haven't seen the video, but I'm certainly familiar with the story that you're telling, and I've seen some drawings and that type of thing. But that's true. But we think the Great Pyramid was built using water locks. They were able to move 70-ton stones with ease. The
yeah,
original builders, that was the largest stones, could move 70 tons. But children in the 1830s, before the Civil War, children were able to move 70-ton payloads in the Erie Canal. When built, the Erie Canal in the United States was 4.5 feet deep, and the barges held a capacity of 70 tons. And a lot of children worked on the Erie Canal, so children could move 70-ton payloads over 100 years ago. But here in the 21st century, Egyptologists, they can't move 70-ton payloads. So it's interesting. They just expanded the Panama Canal, and they didn't use horns to blow a sound, and they didn't use a magic wand or anything, because the engineers down there really did want to move heavy payloads, big ships. So they expanded the Panama Canal using technology that is the highest technology in the 21st century to move big, heavy objects.
yeah.
And that technology is water locks. So it's the technology of choice in the 21st century. And we think it was the technology of choice when the Great Pyramid was built.
Well, look at what's going through the Panama Canal, though. That what's being moved along there is a lot bigger than 70 tons.
They're 1,000-ton payloads,
Yeah.
those big cruise ships and oil tankers. And that's how we move our heaviest objects that we move. And in ancient times, probably they used water locks to move the heaviest objects they moved. So it's it's a very sophisticated water with the use of water technology to move and lift payloads.
Yeah. Now, I was not I was not familiar with the Erie Canal there. You said they used the same technologies maybe then?
They did. The Erie Canal used water locks, the same technology that we use to move a 1,000-ton object.
Yeah.
In the 1830s, they built it from New York City to the Erie Canal, and it lifts payloads higher than the height of the Great Pyramid. It was built in the 1830s before the Civil War, and it was a fabulous success. It moved enough cargo that weighed the weight of the Great Pyramid in about 2 years. So its water locks are a fast, powerful, and controllable way to lift and move very heavy payloads.
Hmm. You know, I do a lot of radio shows when it comes to aliens and UFOs, and I know this is going to be theorizing a little bit, but what do you think about that far back? Could there have been an alien influence on technology? Maybe show them how to do that, or what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. There could have been. There could have been ancient aliens. We see those shows on TV all the time. And Anunnaki or Thrawn or the Emerald Tablets or all of that. But there could also be in ancient people, our ancestors, some of them could have been geniuses, like a Nikola Tesla. He figured out alternating current in one day. Or somebody like Victor Schauberger, who understand the subtle properties of water and how water and other fluids moved in a whirlpool or implosion, or other people like that. So it could have been aliens, and I don't discount that at all, but it also could have just been ancient geniuses who understood the properties of physics and the world around them in a very profound way. And then there might have been another guy that figured out the bonding agent between the casing stones, which is stronger than the stones itself. So there's a lot of ancient technologies that we don't know the origins for.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to think about. But who, in other words, like if it was aliens or whatever, like who built the Great Pyramid or where the technology came from, doesn't really help anybody. It doesn't. Like let's say your wife needed a C-section, okay?
Yeah.
Who figured out how to do a C-section ain't going to help your wife.
Yeah.
Where the technology came from isn't going to help anybody. But
Yeah.
the technology itself will. In fact, ancient Egyptians, they did C-sections, they did birth control. In South America, they did brain surgery. And there's a lot of high technologies from ancient times. So where the technology came from is probably unanswerable, but we're trying to find out what that technology is and use it to help our modern but very troubled world.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there was a very highly sophisticated society back then that was involved in building these things, and it disappeared somehow. Maybe it collapsed, maybe it moved somewhere else, but that opens up another question about us. What we have reached what we think is a higher societal technological age here, but then again, compared to what? Compared to what we would be if we were uninterrupted, let's say 1,000 years from now. Or maybe these people that built those things, they had something happen also that made them move, maybe off the planet, or maybe move to India or somewhere. do you think on the path that we're going right now, what do you think our chances are of not becoming one of them?
Well, civilizations come and go. You and I agree that the Great Pyramid and Sphinx were probably much older than traditional Egyptologists think, and possibly pre-Ice Age. So something happened that I think destroyed the civilization that built the Great Pyramid. It might have been, the biblical flood. It could have been an asteroid hit. It could have been some sort of a disease or political strife or, invaders or who knows what. But that civilization came and it went. So we think we are in modern times a highly advanced civilization. But when you consider all the pollution, when you consider that we create, especially with our energy systems, with transporting oil from the Middle East and then polluting the environment, and also all of the injustice in terms of poverty, violence. So some would say that we are not as advanced as we think we are. But the higher you get in technology, the more things appear to be like magic. That's a saying.
Yeah.
High technology does appear to be like magic, but also high technology, the higher it gets, the more fragile it is. Like we use computers that bad people are hacking, and we have like power grids that may or may not fail. If the power grid fails, will be back to the Stone Age type of thing. So we're a fragile civilization,
Yeah.
and we need all the help we can get. And I think using this ancient and efficient water pumping system that the Great Pyramid was built to be, it would be a great alternative to generating electricity using nuclear power or even hydroelectric dams, which have adverse environmental impact. So
Yeah.
hopefully our civilization and our infrastructure can survive, because we're living pretty good here in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And the technologies that we're looking at looks pretty advanced to us. And of course, then, our technology to somebody 200 years ago, that would look like magic too. But just like a magician said, there's no such thing as magic. He says there is only science of the future.
Oh, I like that. Mm-hmm.
He talked about, he was a mind reader, so he talked about the science of the mind. And that's probably where we're going next, either by chip or by actually developing the mind. And then we can start tapping into that universal source where all these technologies are available to us. And much of this could be replicated. There's some amazing things that I can see coming in the technology of the mind. And these people in the old days that created these things, I just bet they were able to tap into that universal source, or maybe an alien influence that gave them the technologies and helped them make it not necessarily hands-on, but told them this is what you can do to create what you want.
I think that's true. I think the future holds some hopefully some wonderful technologies that will help us understand the mysteries of the past. I hope there's not too many side effects, if you will. We think the Great Pyramid pumped water without any pollution, and that it pumped water without a meter, if you will. We've in the 21st century, we have energy technologies that are pretty good, but a lot of them are very centralized, like nuclear power plants, hydroelectric dams, and energy costs a lot of money. And we think the cost of energy from the Great Pyramid water pump was quite low. So the lower the cost of energy, the higher the standard of living. And the Great Pyramid provided prosperity for the civilization that built it.
Yeah. We've been talking about the pyramids in Egypt, but there are pyramids all over the world. And in fact, in northwestern China, there is a pyramid that is made out of, I forget now if it was iron or steel. And it is some 50 meters tall. That's 150 feet tall. So it is huge, but it's made out of steel or iron. And nobody knows. The locals, they say it has been there since the beginning of time.
There are some pyramids in China,
Yep.
but they are lacking in terms of research. In other words, we don't know enough about them. And there is a number of pyramids in China. Some were possibly used for tombs, possibly, but other purposes. I just hope that China opens up and allows more research to be conducted as to how they were built and their purpose. So that is interesting. And then South America, there's as
Yep.
well pyramids. All of these pyramids have a little bit different design, made out of different materials. Some of the pyramids in South America are made out of stone rubble, if you will, or dirt. And so there's different designs, different sizes, different angles, different types of passages inside. So you can't really lump them together, to have a universal method that they were built or a universal purpose, because there's a lot of differences. There's a pyramid in Las Vegas, but it was probably not built the same way the Great Pyramid was built. Some of the pyramids in Egypt are made out of sun-baked bricks that weigh 70 pounds.
Yeah.
And they were probably moved different than a 70-ton payload. So yeah, there's a lot of pyramids, but they have different purposes, different designs, different construction techniques. So that's a problem that people have. They want a magic bullet that will solve the problem for all pyramids. And then when I present a theory about how a single pyramid was built, they say, well, other pyramids weren't built that way. So then the Great Pyramid wasn't built that way, because they think that however they were built, they were all built the same. But no, it's all different.
Oh, absolutely, because you can look at it. There are several different designs. Obviously, a specific people probably would build the pyramids the same way. So there may have been different people at different times building these different pyramids, like the pyramids in Mexico. They are step pyramids.
Yes.
They don't have those on the Giza Plateau. So those are two different people, probably at two definitely different times they were built.
Right. And if you just make something out of masonry or stone or even rubble, if you want it to be tall, it has to have a big base. Yeah. So it's big at the bottom, small at the top. So that doesn't mean that there's any relationship or correlation between a Mexican pyramid or South American pyramid with pyramids in Egypt. So it's, and I don't think that there's a relationship in terms of any shared purpose.
Yeah, and let's take it one step further. I have NASA prints of a pyramid on Mars. I have NASA print of 2 pyramids, actually 3 or 4 of them on the moon. I have NASA prints of 2 pyramids on Venus, and they are triangular. They're triangular pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
So who were the pyramid builders? That is a question that I think we're going to be asking ourselves for a while.
Yes, there's some sort of a shape on Mars that is attributed to being a pyramid.
Yep.
And I think it's 5-sided, that one. But we need more. We need more research. We need to know more about it. I'm in favor of sending people to Mars to research this, specifically that structure, the pyramid on Mars, and find out about it. But we spend money on everything else, We cut the taxes for the rich. We want to build a wall. We have a huge military budget, larger than the rest of the world combined. Why not send people up to Mars and find out about that pyramid and see what it's all about?
Yeah, and when they're talking about going to Mars, they're talking to go to some wild place. Why not land in a Cydonia area where you have the face on Mars and we have the pyramids right there?
Yeah, I agree fully.
Yeah. Or even send a robot out there to run around and take pictures.
Yeah, they'll go anywhere but Cydonia to keep us from knowing, if you will. It's just a strange world we live in.
It's all about control, I suppose. But
it is.
When it comes to the Cheops pyramid, though, there is some incredible mathematics locked up in that one when it comes to the distance and where it's located and speed of light. And maybe I think the people that put that together, they were really sharp. They knew much higher mathematics principles than most of the people today do.
I do think the builders of the Great Pyramid were geniuses and knew quite a bit, but I think that modern mankind has tried in vain to understand the Great Pyramid, and they've come up with a way of understanding it by making up these correlations between two different things, like a feature of the Great Pyramid, and then, like, let's say even the speed of light, and then just contend that correlation, because it's precise, is valid, but precision doesn't really validate a correlation. So I'm not a proponent of these correlations that people come up with. Modern people have made up these correlations about events pointing to stars or all of that, but I'm not a proponent of that. 100 years ago, the same thing happened, but they compared the Great Pyramid with the Holy Bible. So they come up with this: if you use this angle and go in that direction, then the Great Pyramid predicted the birthplace of Jesus over there in Nazareth. So they say that the Great Pyramid was prophecy in stone, and they used the pyramid inch to figure out the timetable of the flood and the crucifixion and all of that. So that's called pyramidology, and you can look that up. But there's more precise correlations in this realm of comparing the Great Pyramid with the Bible than there are with these modern day correlations about the speed of light or the curvature of the earth or stars or everything else like that. But it's the research methods that seem to be rather poor in terms of not having a causation for those correlations, just like the people that compared the Bible with the Great Pyramid. So that's why these, like the Orion correlation theory, will never be embraced by legitimate academic researchers, not because the correlations aren't precise, they are precise, but because the correlations are just cherry picking of two unrelated data points. So I'm not a proponent of a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I understand. And of course, they did know magnetics because it is aligned with north, I suppose.
It is aligned with north, and people put a lot of emphasis on that. But I ask them, it's aligned with north, but what is the significance of that?
Oh, that I can answer.
Okay. Let me know.
Because when I was experimenting with those razor blades, it had to be aligned. One side had to be aligned with north in order to get a good effect on it. Otherwise, it really didn't work that well.
Okay, sounds good to me. Here's another explanation.
So
let me tell you this.
Yeah.
The alignment of the Great Pyramid didn't matter at all to the original builders. They could have stuck it anywhere where the points The corners pointed north, but because it didn't matter, they just built the Great Pyramid square to the world.
Yeah.
Just like the alignment of my house doesn't really matter, but my house is in alignment with the house next to my house, you know?
Right.
So, I mean, you have the direct physical evidence, but its significance is just made up by people, if you will. You see what I'm saying?
I see
There's no causation.
I see we got 2 minutes left of the show here, so let them know where they can get a hold of you, and mention your books again and where they can get those, and a final thought for the listeners.
Well, the final thought is for people like yourself, myself, everybody. We're all researchers, and to conduct research, the most radical thing I can tell somebody is to read a book. You know, that's a good idea. I've written a couple of books and produced a couple of documentaries. You can find out about those from our website at thepump.org. And I just ask people to become familiar with the research, the direction of research that I'm taking, that the Great Pyramid was infrastructure, and that helped the people that built it in a tangible way. So that's all I ask, is people to become familiar with our research and then contemplate the information that we present. Yeah,
that's good. That is good. And I see now that we got 1 minute left. So the books are Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid and The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. And I suppose prosperity machine, that is derived from, if there is water, you can have prosperity, right?
That's correct. Yes, that is correct. We use water to generate electricity. So hydroelectric dams are prosperity machines. So yes, and the Great Pyramid actually helped people in a tangible way.
Yeah. It is phenomenal structure, and there you see them all over the world and on other planets. So we just have to keep digging, and maybe one of these days we will find out who were the pyramid builders, and we got an idea of why now. The question is, did they have the same purpose on other planets? Or maybe they did. So we just got to keep an open mind and just keep digging.
You are right, Augie.
All right. Well, we are down here to the end. So until next week, we have been talking to Stephen Myers here on Pyramid, How and Why. And go visit his website and educate yourself, because there is so little of it in the major media. You got to dig for it yourself. So we will see you later. Next week, we will be back again.